A very good Thursday morning to you, and welcome to our viewers here in the U.S. and around the world. I'm Jim Sciutto.
And I'm Poppy Harlow. We're glad you're with us as we follow this breaking news out of the United Kingdom. Buckingham Palace says 96-year-old Queen Elizabeth is under medical supervision because doctors are concerned for her health. Her son and the heir apparent to the throne, Prince Charles, arrived at Balmoral Castle in Scotland to be by her side. Her other three children, along with Princes William and Harry, are also headed there right now.
Our reporters, correspondents are standing by. Anna Stewart at Buckingham Palace. CNN royal historian Kate Williams joins us from London as well. And Kate, I wonder if I could begin with you, because we've been speaking in the last hour about the enormous span of her leadership, the longest serving monarch really in history, certainly in the UK history, more than 70 years, celebrated earlier this year. We came across something she said at the young age of 21 on a visit to South Africa before she assumed the throne, which struck us as telling of the life she would lead and the service she would give. We're going to play that right now. I want to get your reaction.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. But I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do. I know that your support will be unfailingly given. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
Her vow there in 1947 for a lifetime of service. She actually referenced it in her Platinum Jubilee Commonwealth speech when she talked about renewing the promise made there. Tell us, Kate, through history, she did, didn't she?
She did, and it's such a powerful speech, isn't it, Jim? And I'm so pleased you picked it, because here is she, a 21-year-old girl, on her 21st birthday, saying, my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be dedicated to your service. And what a life it has been, and what a life of service it has been for her. She's been this, this incredible queen, and always throughout her reign, she's thought of service. She most recently actually signed herself your servant, Elizabeth R. She is one who believes in duty, in service, and that was a vow she made when she was just 21. She would keep it throughout her life, and as you say, what an incredible reign. She was born in 1926. She's the longest reigning monarch in British history, and we recently were celebrating her fantastic Platinum Jubilee. And I think, what a striking image yesterday of the Queen meeting the new Prime Minister, Elizabeth Truss, and saying goodbye to the old Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. She can't have been feeling well yesterday, and yet she still came out there to do her duty, and that, I think, is an incredible testament to her strength of will.
Anna, you were at Buckingham Palace. For our viewers that may just be joining us, can you bring us up to speed on the developments this morning? We've heard really from everyone of significance around her, not only the palace, but the new Prime Minister, from the Archbishop of Canterbury. Bring us up to speed, if you would.
So a few hours ago, we had that short statement from Buckingham Palace that has caused such deep concern from the health of Her Majesty. In the statement, they said, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. And moments after that, we were told that some of her children were on their way to Balmoral, and that indeed, in fact, all of her children have now travelled to Balmoral or are on their way, including actually grandchildren, Prince William, Prince Harry, and the Duchess of Sussex as well. That is how deep the concern is. So often there are concerns about the Queen's health. She is 96 years old. We know that she has suffered from episodic mobility issues now, at least since October of last year, when she spent a night in hospital. But we are generally, I would say, steered away from being overly concerned about the health, and the palace spokespeople often tell us they won't give a running commentary on Her Majesty's health. That is not the case today, and I can tell you that Buckingham Palace here is lined with live positions. UK news outlets are doing rolling coverage on this news, and I'm not sure if you can see, but people are beginning to gather outside the gates of Buckingham Palace, even though, of course, Her Majesty isn't there. She is in Scotland, but I think they are there awaiting any further news from the palace, and at this stage that is what we are doing. We're awaiting sort of further statements from the palace, but in the meantime we are getting statements from, as you say, all sorts of people, former prime ministers, including the new Prime Minister Liz Truss. Let's bring her tweet up. She said, "The whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. My thoughts and the thoughts of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time." I think it is worth noting that Liz Truss, who's only been Prime Minister, of course, since the beginning of the week, she met the Queen on Tuesday in Balmoral for a formal appointment by Her Majesty the Queen, invited to hold this government. But that was done not here at Buckingham Palace, as you would expect. That was done at Balmoral, and that was on the advice of doctors. And then yesterday, the Queen was meant to do a Privy Council meeting with the new Prime Minister and new members of the Cabinet. And unfortunately, even though that was a Zoom meeting, that was called off. So there have been a number of events this week, I would say, that have perhaps risen the cause of concern. But today, in the last few hours, these statements really troubling indeed.
Notably, Kate Williams, and you've covered the Queen for so many, the royal family for so many years, and other instances when there were concerns, though clearly not as deep as today's concerns about her health. And I wonder, when you look at these various signals here, family members traveling to her side at Balmoral, the BBC going into rolling coverage and not being cautioned off that rolling coverage of these events, notes being passed to the Labour and Conservative leaders while they were on the floor of Parliament. Do you see some preparation here, perhaps, for the population to lessen the blow of any news that may come going forward? Is there significance in these steps?
I think, Jim, this is very serious. This is very concerning. Just as Anna was saying, usually the palace say the Queen is fine, it's just a few tests, nothing to worry about. But this, they really did say that doctors are concerned, and I think it's very significant that the family are at or on their way to her bedside. Really, this is a very serious moment for the Queen. And I think it's very, very serious, very notable that she didn't meet with the Privy Council last night. She would have done if she could, and she clearly wasn't feeling up to it. So I think we are looking at quite a serious moment. The palace are being honest with us, and obviously this is what's causing a lot of concern, a lot of distress. As Anna was saying, people are lining up outside Buckingham Palace. I was just coming into London on a train earlier, and all the train were talking about it. People were really wondering what was going on, because she is someone who means so much, held in so much affection. So many people, they respect her, but they also hold her in this great affection. They love her, and really she's always been the Queen. She's been here since 1952. Very few people can remember a time without her, and that's why she has this huge significance in our hearts, and people can't imagine the thought of her not being here anymore.
I mean, Anna, exactly to Kate's point, it is so notable that a woman who was born never expecting to be queen becomes queen in her 20s, reigns for 70 years on, and is someone who 80% of the population in Britain have lived their entire lives with only her as the monarch.
Yeah, it's been a reign of longevity. It's been a reign of stability for the British people, for the Commonwealth. And this Queen, as you heard from the speech she gave at her 21st birthday, where she dedicated her whole life, whether it be long or short, to public duty, that is very much what we have seen now for 70 years. And you're right, you know, this was a Queen that wasn't born into the role. It was the abdication of her uncle that threw her and her father into that limelight. It's amazing to think of the history that she has witnessed, the fact that her father served in the First World War and her husband in the Second World War. If you consider the incredible events that have unfolded here in the UK and around the world during her reign, and you're right, over 80% of the public here have known no other monarch. So people will be deeply concerned by this news, deeply worried. I think we saw it very much in the Platinum Jubilee celebrations earlier this year, where I met people who weren't necessarily royal fans, but they turned up out of respect and love, really, for Her Majesty the Queen. And that is something that I've seen throughout my reporting. I'm always amazed at how many people, not just even in the UK, but how many people travel from overseas at various events where Her Majesty is, and the dedication that she has shown. She's always said that she needs to be seen to be believed, and she's done just that for 70 years.
Yeah, 15 British prime ministers. She's met 13 U.S. presidents during that time period. It is quite a span of history. And you know, Poppy, we were saying earlier, going back to the role her family played in World War II in terms of bucking up the British population through the Blitz. She's been there through it all.
She certainly has. Thank you both. We'll get back to you very shortly, so stay with us. We are continuing to follow the latest on Queen Elizabeth's health, as members of the royal family are heading now, some already there, at Balmoral Castle to be by her side. Our Dr. Sanjay Gupta will join the conversation right after this.
We're watching the breaking news, concerning news out of the UK this morning, where Queen Elizabeth is under medical supervision after Buckingham Palace announced her doctors concerned for her health.
That's right, and her son, Prince Charles, has already arrived at Balmoral Castle. Her other children on the way there, as well as her grandsons, Princes William and Harry. Let's bring back in CNN Royal Historian Kate Williams and our Chief Medical Correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Thank you both very much for being with us as we continue to monitor this. Sanjay, I'd like your take on the statement that the palace put out this morning, because it begins by saying, following further evaluation, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended that she remain under medical supervision. Further evaluation, but yet she's not going to the hospital. What does it tell you?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I can only read into that as much as I think anybody else, and I think, you know, there's not a lot of details, and I think that that's by design. Further evaluation, you know, we know that she's been evaluated over some time, but now it's turned into more of a constant medical supervision as opposed to intermittent sort of checks. So that's obviously of concern. We have some idea of her past medical history. That is known. You know, she was hospitalized, for example, in October of last year, but we didn't have a lot of details about that. But to your point, they told us that she was hospitalized. So what we're hearing now is sort of a little bit difficult to reconcile, in the sense that there's obviously a very concerning situation, but it does not appear that she has gone to the hospital. So why doesn't someone go to the hospital? Well, if they don't think someone is ill enough to warrant that, or if they don't think there will be any benefit of going to the hospital. So I don't know, and I don't think anybody else really knows, and I think it's, you know, people, you know, I think it's probably not right to speculate on specifically what's happening, other than whatever it is, the doctors have significant concern, significant enough to release that statement, and we know, at least we're being told, she has not gone to the hospital for this.
Kate, you have witnessed in the past when there have been concerns about the state of the Queen's health. There have been times, for instance, going back to when she was testing positive for coronavirus earlier this year, there have been times when some in the press and the public have raised the level of concern, and the palace pushed back and said, no, not now. In effect, things will be okay. This time, our reporters in London have noted it's different. The BBC is covering this wall to wall. They deliberately, the palace released this statement, and now her family traveling to be by her side. Can you describe the significance of those differences?
Yes, it's incredibly significant. As you say, normally the Queen's health, she always has this fantastic health. She's in radiant health, considering she's 96. It's always been incredible. She's hardly ever been in hospital. And there were obviously last year she was in hospital, and the palace just said, this is a few tests, nothing to worry about. And every time people started to panic, they said, no, nothing to worry about. And this, it is more serious. This, they've said very clearly. They haven't said she's just taking a day off, she's just taking a day to rest. They've said, they've really made it clear it is serious concern. And I think there's a lot of serious concerns. It's very obvious that this is different to the previous smaller health scares we've had before. The family are on their way to her, and that, I think, is very significant. The palace are very keen to be honest with us at this point. It's clear that although the Queen looked frail yesterday, where she was meeting Boris Johnson to say goodbye as Prime Minister, and then Liz Truss, our 15th Prime Minister, meeting her to welcome her, she looked frail, but she still looked happy. She still looked on top of the job. But it was obvious that was quite exhausting. The Privy Council Zoom meeting that evening that she was scheduled for was cancelled. And today, obviously, something very different has happened this morning. So in the early hours of this morning, there's been a decline, and the palace are concerned. And we obviously, just as you've been saying, we don't know anything. There's nothing to speculate. We don't know anything. But it is very concerning that the Queen, who's always had such fantastic health, does seem to be a different situation at this point.
Sanjay, she has had health concerns, relatively recent health incidents, but she's pulled through them. I mean, what do we know about what she has been through?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of remarkable, as was just being said. I mean, for 96 years old, she has had, pretty good health. I mean, the timeline of her medical history, at least over the last 20 years or so, going back to 2003, that's when she had this operation for her knee, and she was 77 years old at that point. And then, 10 years later, in 2013, is when she was hospitalized for gastroenteritis. And again, she was 87 years old at that point. And then, as we were just discussing, more recently, there was this hospitalization again in October of last year, which she seemed to have recovered from. She had COVID. February of this year, which she seems to have recovered from. She did have these more recent issues with mobility problems and having to miss events, but 96 years old, this is what we know. There may be things that we don't know specifically about her overall health, but overall pretty good. But again, the most recent thing about the doctors being concerned, as was just stated, it seems like something happened to go from let's keep an eye on the Queen to saying, look, medical supervision, sort of denoting around the clock sort of care now being provided, or at least checks being provided. We don't know. I think it's good to say we don't know regarding what is specifically driving this, but whatever it is pretty serious.
Kate, you could almost feel a collective lump in the throat of the British people and others outside of the UK who have followed the legacy of this Queen so closely through the years and the decades as they hear this news, and it's concerning enough that her closest family members are going by her side. Can you describe how the British people take this moment? Describe the level of concern and emotion.
There's a huge amount of concern here in London. People are very concerned. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's worried about it. And that reflects the country, and I think the whole world. People are they're so fond of the Queen. They've got so much affection for her. And also, really, we never, as you were saying earlier, only 80% of us have never known any of the monarch. My parents can only vaguely remember a time when the Queen wasn't the Queen. And simply, when you look at it, when you think that just a few months ago she was looking great at the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, and then in May she opened the Elizabeth line, which is our new underground line in London. It's a bright purple underground line in tribute to her love of bright colours. She was wearing yellow. She was discussing how to put money on your travel card with a member of staff. She looked great. She sounded great. It was all fabulous. And I know we were all hoping and planning that she was going to have a 100th birthday in a few years' time. And so really, it is very, very worrying and very concerning. And there's so much love for her, so much affection for her, so much respect for this woman who never was expected to be Queen. She was thrust into a new role when her uncle abdicated at the age of 10, and she was suddenly then pushed into this new role, came to the throne when she was a very young mother because her father died very young, and has served the role with such duty. To think someone who was born just after not long after the end of World War I, when women didn't all have the vote in the United Kingdom, and what she's seen, globalization, technology. She has been around the world 42 times on state visits. She has really transformed the face of the monarchy in terms of service and in terms of diplomacy and in terms really of extending the hand of friendship around the world. What she's done, incredible achievement. And we also expect her to be here during sad times. In the COVID pandemic, she gave this fantastic address in which she talked about how, it was hard times, but we would all meet again. And that was so moving.
It certainly was. Thank you very much, Kate, for helping us remember all of that. Stay close as we continue to follow this breaking news. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, thank you.
This morning, the somber news we continue to follow out of the United Kingdom. Queen Elizabeth's doctors now recommending she remain under medical supervision amid growing concerns for her health.
The Queen's son, Prince Charles, already by her side as we speak at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. Her other 3 children on their way to be with the Queen. Our Matthew Chance is in London with more political reaction from leaders around the world. Matthew.
Yeah, well, it's important to remember that the Queen Elizabeth is not just Queen of Britain, she's Queen of, I think, 15 countries. And so this is a huge international story, as well as an enormous and very moving British one as well. There have been plans, of course, in the pipeline for years about what to do in the event of the death of Queen Elizabeth. It's called Operation London Bridge, but it seems that the news of her sharply deteriorating health seems to have come as a surprise to the politicians in this country. There were some quite dramatic scenes in Parliament earlier on today when Liz Truss, who's the new British Prime Minister, who was only sworn in a couple of days ago by Queen Elizabeth in Balmoral, her summer estate in Scotland, where Liz Truss was approached by one of her political aides. The aide whispered in her ear. The Prime Minister looked very sort of ashen-faced and stood up and left the parliamentary chamber. She later gave a statement on social media saying the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace. My thoughts and the thoughts of people across the United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time. The Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer, has also issued a statement along the same lines, saying he's deeply worried about the news from Buckingham Palace. And the Scottish First Minister, of course, it's in Scotland, where Queen Elizabeth is currently located at her Balmoral estate. She said, all of us are feeling profoundly concerned at the reports of Her Majesty's health. So there are these expressions of political concern, and it's very serious, because not just are we seeing top politicians in this country make these statements, which they wouldn't do unless the matter they'd been advised was very serious indeed, but we're also seeing senior royals, the children, the grandchildren of Queen Elizabeth, either already at Balmoral, presumably at her bedside, or making their way there right now. That's already happening. And the other thing that's happening is, for instance, British broadcasters like the British Broadcasting Corporation have gone to rolling coverage. Satellite trucks have been deployed in force outside Buckingham Palace and other key areas. And so it seems that the plans are being made to receive the next step, any news about Queen Elizabeth's health.
Yeah. Matthew, it strikes me as you were reading some of those reactions from leaders in the UK that many of them, most of them perhaps, haven't been alive for as long as she served as the monarch, so some 70 years, more than 70 years, celebrated in the Jubilee earlier this year. You describe preparations. You also describe the sort of sharing of this information in a different way than the palace has dealt with information about her health in recent months and years, when there have been other concerns and sometimes overblown concerns about her health. To your knowledge and reporting, is the public face of this statement and the confirmation of family members traveling to be by her side, is that part of a plan in place to let people know how serious this is, right? Perhaps prepare the ground?
I think that, normally I don't cover it that closely, but I think the palace doesn't usually give a close-up running commentary of the status of the Queen's health. And so the fact that they have said she's being supervised by doctors is in itself, a sign that this is serious. This is not just a little blip in the health. Remember, she's 96 years old, and what a figure of continuity she has been. I was reading an article about this just a few minutes ago, and the first Prime Minister that worked beneath her was Winston Churchill, who was born 101 years before the current Prime Minister, Liz Truss, her 15th Prime Minister, who she swore in just on Tuesday. So this has been a figure. Queen Elizabeth is a figure of remarkable continuity in this country.
Yeah.
As constant as a Northern Star, that is what one of her secretaries, Simon Lewis, once said about her, and it just keeps sticking with me as we continue to cover her health and watch this very closely. Matthew Chance, thank you for all of that, and we will have much more on Queen Elizabeth's health live from Windsor Castle ahead.
Back to our breaking news, the somber news out of the UK. The country, the world watching closely, perhaps with their hearts in their throats, as we've learned Queen Elizabeth's family is by her side, traveling to her side. Her doctors recommending she remain under medical supervision.
Our Scott McLean joins us live from Windsor Castle. Our Max Foster joins us from Buckingham Palace. Scott, let me begin with you from Windsor. As the nation, obviously the United Kingdom, hanging on every word possible from the palace about her condition. What can you tell us this morning?
Hey, Jim and Poppy. Yeah, the weather seems to really be a good indicator of the nation's mood right now. pretty somber at this point. What's interesting is we just arrived here in Windsor and we've had a chance to speak with people very briefly, and this is normally the Queen's residence. It's obviously a major tourist attraction as well, and so all kinds of people have been coming out of the castle grounds after having toured it, and to be honest, many people hadn't heard anything about the Queen's potential health issues that we were hearing about. I was at Clarence House earlier on today as well, near Buckingham Palace, which is the official residence of Prince Charles, and similarly it was kind of an odd scene because no one had heard anything, and you know, North American tourists were kind of looking and wondering why all of this press was suddenly assembling along the mall there and outside Buckingham Palace, as well, as if something was happening, but they didn't know what. And that is simply the same situation across the country, as people are hearing about what's happening, but we really don't have a lot of information at this stage.
Max, a legacy in terms of length of time, 7 decades, but also triumphs and challenges overcome.
I mean, incredible legacy, arguably the greatest monarch that's ever lived. If you speak to some historians, they would argue that because of the tumultuous period in modern history that she oversaw, and ended up being more popular at the end of her reign, or the twilight of her reign as we are now, than she was right at the beginning. So an extraordinary reign and a truly global figure. We haven't had an update for an hour or so. I think the next update we'll have is when all of the members of the royal family have arrived at Balmoral. At that point, they will have a time to regroup and share news together, and then they'll be ready to tell the wider world. Initially, the Prime Minister, ambassadors around the world, also governors general around the world. So there's a process to go through to give an update on the Queen's health. It is obviously a serious update. We don't know what that is. We will find out when the public finds out. But I think we need all of the members of the royal family to be within the castle for that to happen. They're currently in transit. I understand that some of them have arrived at Aberdeen Airport, and that's about an hour away from Balmoral. So we're expecting some sort of update in the next couple of hours.
Well, thank you very much, Scott McLean and Max Foster, really for helping guide us through all of this news of such importance to the world. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. We will see you right back here tomorrow morning. I'm Poppy Harlow.
And I'm Jim Sciutto. Anderson Cooper will pick up our special coverage right after a quick break.